Your authors are going to identify both the concept of needs and contributions and theories around patient needs and contributions as central components in thinking about the distribution of healthcare. So these are the main factors that your authors argue in the just distribution of all goods. And need is identified as a lack of something that is considered necessary, noting that many needs, if unsatisfied um, at a basic level, can lead to the destruction of the human person. So, three types of needs are identified in this chapter. Inherent needs are universal and exist no matter what the individual thinks. So we can think of inherent needs as nourishment, water and hydration. These are things that um, simply are needed for the human body to function. Subjective needs are going to grow out of more of the ideas and desires of the individual. So this could be in the context of a relationship where a patient might feel that they need the other to be with them or to help them make decisions. Anything that is particular to the, the personality and the individual. Socially induced are a result of historical and material development over time. So your book gives some examples of indoor plumbing and running water um, are certainly considered necessities in American society, while in other parts of the world maybe they're not seen as much. Um, just because a need is identified doesn't also mean that everyone has one as well. So one of the things that can be noted here in terms of healthcare distribution um, can include the fact that some types of healthcare have been identified as a need over a period of time, where in the past it was not considered so. So I'm thinking about areas of preventative health. I think even of my own parents' generation and the concept of mental health and counseling as something that's a healthcare need would be unheard of. It just was not something that was identified as something that would be needed. So, if there is no contribution, as we turn to the role of contribution, your authors make some key points about how individual contributions to society is very important. They first note that without contributions to society, there's nothing to distribute. So, without an economy, without goods, without a variety of social goods that are provided, we wouldn't have healthcare and other social goods to distribute. The failure to acknowledge individual contributions to society can also undermine a powerful motive for producing goods. So I do agree that people's desire to produce and to contribute to society is certainly a very important sense of human dignity. Justice as distribution is accomplished through the application of practical wisdom to meet the demands and needs of human dignity in social and economic circumstances of the time. So I think what this is trying to get at is the idea that, well, we can kind of envision a variety of needs. We know that all of these needs place a demand on society, and the reality is we have to look at those social and economic circumstances in particular. So we're going to look at one in particular important legislation around economic and political realities with the Affordable Care Act. Political and economic realities also force us to acknowledge that the cost of basic goods, including healthcare, must be considered when dealing with scarce resources. So again, I think the reminder of kind of making hard decisions given our limited resources is important. I have introduced a bullet here of my own, and that's simply to say that I had a little trouble trying to think about the notion of contribution in the context of justice and distribution. Uh, I do agree that human dignity is connected with one's ability to contribute to society, but I thought about those individuals in society where contributions to society may be um, a thing of the past or a potential, and this is particularly the young and the old. And so I was looking and rereading the chapter and trying to figure out, while I agree that we should respect an individual's ability to contribute to society, I'm not sure why that's allocated around the distribution of healthcare. Um, uh, my ethic would be more that we need to treat a person who presents a particular need. That makes sense to me. But to try to ascertain what their contribution is to society, I didn't quite understand how that helped formulate an ethic. Um, with that being said, I want to look at a particular example where this ethical notion of a right to health care doesn't always specify for whom or how the right is to be honored. And even when there is a claim against society for health care, this does not specify how society is to fulfill the claim. So lots of particulars need to be worked out in distributing this. One example, and it was quickly mentioned, is what is commonly referred to as Obamacare, and the full name is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And this was a very important piece of legislation that addressed some of these particulars, again, given our political and economic reality. So in a simple way, three goals of this legislation was to limit the amount of spending in certain ways, to increase access to care for Americans, and to improve and control the quality of that care. Um, and so while we're going to look at one particular example that we could, debate, I think that we do, and I said this early on in this unit, we do have to see these as issues, and in terms of an ethic of justice and distribution, these are going to be core categories, regardless of political affiliation and disagreements we might have. So let's look at this one example of the mandate to purchase health care. Um, okay, what that's attempting to do is gain a greater increase of involvement in healthcare and in terms of healthcare insurance. And so that provides a better satisfaction for the variety of needs that a society may have. So the the benefits of this particular piece of the legislation is that it's going to provide an effort to control insurance costs, requiring young and healthy people to have insurance and spreading more widely the risk pool from which insurers draw their funds. Um, the debate, and this made its way through the courts on the other side, is questioning whether this infringes an individual autonomy and choice. Um, does the mandate to purchase health insurance affect one's individual decision to enter or not into contracts? And the way this was kind of decided in the Supreme Court was to see this as a tax, which would be legally acceptable. But I think it still raises some of the, and this is one of others, ethical debates we could have about um, the Affordable Care Act, or commonly known as Obamacare. Again, the particulars can be debated, but I think if part of our ethic is looking at a distribution of care, the questions that it raises are important ones. The last distinction we want to make is the difference between healthcare versus public health. Public health did come up in your nursing code of ethics as well, and this deals with potential health problems. This is going to be where the Environmental Protection Agency or other government agencies that try to look over safety and care in the workplace is important. So sewage treatments, water purification, things like that. We know that when we put allocation towards public health, overall we'll get benefit. We'll get decreases of certain diseases, and we can certainly see many positives. Healthcare is seeking to cure or rehabilitate once that um, disease or issue has come forward. And your book notes that there's sort of an emotional difference between the influence of public health and health care. And I think they put this rather cleanly. Quote, no one ever knows that he or she was saved from a disease by public health measures, even if the incidence of that disease has dropped significantly. On the other hand, anyone sick who is cured by a physician or nurse fully appreciates the influence of healthcare on his or her decision. So both are important. It's not always clear what should receive greater attention or funding, but I think there is often the notion of individual care and hopefully cure in healthcare versus public health, which is putting those resources into areas that don't always see that individual and relationship context. Okay, we'll do one more discussion on microallocation.